Good evening. Welcome to the August 6, 2024 City of Minot Planning Commission meeting. Call the roll.
Bauman,
Here.
Gates, Iverson, Kibler,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Longton, Menum,
Here.
Offerall,
Here.
Fontanilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
With that, let's move to agenda item number 2, Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 4, approval of the July 2024 regular meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion to approve by Vice Chair Bauman, second by, which one got it? Fontanilla. Any discussion? Okay, close the discussion. We'll call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Menum, Offerall,
Yes.
Fontanilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 5. Public hearing request by Rob Bernard, representing Jesse and Shanda Olson, owner, and a request of a preliminary plat for a portion of unplatted land located in M2 Heavy Industrial. The applicant is requesting a review, and a description for the property is Government Lot 1, Section 5, Township 155 North, Range 82 West, Ward County. With that, we'll turn it over to city staff for findings and report.
All right. The subject property is bound in black in the map before you. 300-foot buffer is denoted in pink. That's the notification area. The property is unaddressed, and the applicant seeks a recommendation of approval for a preliminary plat for Copacetic addition. The zoning is M2 Heavy Industrial District, and the surrounding area is M2 or unzoned. It's more than 50% outside of the city's ETJ to the north there, so it's not zoned by the city. Future land use for the subject property is heavy industrial and ag and open space adjacent. Here's some site photos facing northwest and south. Some more facing east and southwest. It looks pretty much like an agricultural field in North Dakota. So it is vacant land at the current time. These are the staff's finding of fact. They can be found in the staff's written report. Staff recommends Planning Commission adopt staff finding of fact and recommend the City Council approve the major subdivision preliminary plat for Copacetic addition with the condition that right-of-way along the section line and required utility easements be dedicated in the final plat. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for city staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Diedrichsen, how large is that M2 platted district of which this 10 acres would be a part?
The particular plat that this one's a part of is 40 acres, but
40
it's
acre
significantly
M2 district.
larger area than that that's been zoned industrial. It stretches south down to the airport.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Is there anybody that wishes to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve based on staff finding of fact.
I'll second.
Motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler, second by Commissioner Menum. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Menum,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Fontanilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Moving on, agenda item 5.2, City of Minot Public Works Salt and Sand Building. Public hearing request by Brian Banfill, Public Works Operations Director representing the City of Minot, owner for the request of a public zone plan review of P Public District property as a requirement of constructing a new salt and sand storage building. Legal description for the property is Lot 6, Kemper Addition to the City of Minot, North Dakota. With that, I'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
All right. Subject property is bound in black with a 300-foot notification buffer denoted in pink. Property is located at 1025 31st Street Southeast. The applicant seeks a recommendation of approval for a public zone master plan in order to build a new salt and sand storage building at the Public Works facility. The approval of a site master plan is a requirement of the LDO at any time when you're developing publicly zoned properties. The proposed site plan includes all elements that are required by section 2.22-4C of the that includes general layout of uses on the property, access points, traffic flow, general drainage patterns, sensitive environmental features, and any other additional information as requested by the Development Review Team. The Development Review Team did not request any additional elements be added to the plan. So you can kind of see that there's three plans here. The one on the top left is the drainage plan. The one in the top right shows fencing, landscaping, and general layout of the property. And the one on the bottom kind of combines all of them together and shows the in and out gates as well. This is a not for construction, but drawing of the proposed building that would be placed out on the Public Works facility to store salt and sand. As mentioned before, the zoning is P Public District. The surrounding area is zoned M1, C2, MH, P, and R1. The future land use for the subject property is public institutional. There's also general commercial, urban residential, light industrial, manufactured home communities included in the area. Here's some site photos facing northwest, so shows the proposed site for the building. The photo on the right shows the parking lot south of there. The photo on the left shows the Public Works facility from looking west, and the other shows the additional lots at the Public Works facility facing east. These are staff's finding of fact. They can be found in the staff's written report. And staff does recommend the Planning Commission adopt the staff's finding of fact and recommend approval of the Public Land Development Master Plan.
Thank you. With that, any questions for city staff? Vice Chair Bauman?
This is mostly out of curiosity, but Mr. Dietrichson, I'm wondering if you can tell us where our current facilities are for salt and sand for the city.
Vice Chair Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, they are currently on directly adjacent to the site you were just looking at. It's that building in the background. It's a metal building, and it has begun to rust from the inside out and rot away. Storing salt and sand has that effect on metal buildings, and so this building is, from my understanding, talking with Public Works staff, a significant upgrade to that building with the concrete barriers as the base and the canvas top would keep the salt and sand covered, but less degradation to the building from the storage. But it's right there at the same site.
Cool. Thank you. And so we're going through the process of kind of looking at the public land development master plan, because in our land development ordinance, every time we do something or build on a public parcel, we need to do that. Is that my correct understanding?
Vice Chair Bauman, Chairman Offalo, that is correct. It is a part of our land development ordinance. It just allows an extra layer of public input whenever we are developing public land that is owned by the city of Minot and controlled by us, just to make the public aware of exactly where tax dollar investments are going and
Great.
how they're being used.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. Anybody in attendance wish to speak on this agenda item? Anybody wish to speak in opposition of this agenda item? For or against? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
I'll move to approve based on staff recommendations and finding of fact.
Second.
Motion to approve by Vice Chair Bauman, second by Commissioner Pontanilla. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, call a roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Menum,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Pontanilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on. Agenda item 5.3, Endeavor Sober Living. Public hearing request by Jonathan Lane, representing Endeavor Sober Living, owner for the request of a conditional use permit for a group home on a property zoned R3 Multiple Residence District. The legal description for the property is Lot 10, Block 4, Prairie Green, 3rd Edition in the city of Minot. That will turn it over to staff for findings and report.
All right, thank you, Chairman Offerdahl. As you can see, again, the subject property is bound in black with the 300-foot notification buffer denoted in pink. The property is located at 1101 32nd Avenue Southwest, and the applicant seeks a conditional use permit for a group home with 7 to 12 residents plus staff. The subject property zoning is R3 Multiple Residence District. The surrounding area is zone C2, C4, R1, R2, R3, and R3B. The future land use for the subject property is suburban residential. Adjacent future land use is urban residential. These are the site plans that were submitted by the applicant. It shows the apartment building and the parking where they have grass, green space, and the second one kind of shows the layout of one of the interior apartment, units. And then the third one kind of shows how the units are laid out in the building. This top left, southeast, shows the proposed group home building. The one on the right facing north shows the apartment buildings across 32nd. Facing west shows the building's parking lot in the rear of the building. And the photo on the right facing east shows the building front walkway and the street. These are the staff's finding of fact. They can be found in the staff's written report. The recommendations are quite long on this one, so bear with me. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt staff finding of fact and approve the conditional use permit for a group home with up to 12 residents plus staff with the following conditions. The maximum number of occupants shall not exceed 16 persons, not including staff members. The occupancy is limited to 12 group home residents and 4 emergency residential services residents. A code review is required anytime a change of occupancy is made to the existing building. That change must correspond with meeting current building codes as per that occupancy. Permits are required for construction. That includes any changes to structure, egress of occupants, proposed room dimensions, ceiling heights, etc., would have to be reviewed by the building division with a floor plan and submitted construction documents and will require appropriate building or remodeling permits. Smoke detectors are required. Interconnected smoke detectors are required in each sleeping room, outside each sleeping room, and each story of the building. Carbon monoxide detectors are required. Egress windows with a minimum of 48-inch escape clearance from the floor are required in all sleeping rooms in the basement. ADA compliance may be required. Further review of the interior floor plan and scope of construction is required before this can be analyzed. Under licensing, the conditional use permit shall serve as the license from the City of Minot to operate this facility under the terms of the permit. Upon issuance of the permit, the applicant shall be deemed the permittee or permit holder and agrees to the terms with the permit and to follow all ordinance and regulations of the City of Minot and all county, state, and federal laws and regulations. The permit is non-transferable and expires if the group home ceases occupation. A change in occupancy will require an amendment or a new CUP. The CUP can be revoked by the Planning Commission following a show cause hearing that has met the public hearing notification requirements, and all residents of the property must maintain the yard and no unnecessary litter. With that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for city staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Mr. Diedrichson, one of the caveats to this approval is having the building up to code. Is that right?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, any institutional building such as this that houses a group home falls under building codes that need to be assessed by our building division and approve all construction to provide a safe environment for an institution.
Okay, so we approve it based on the expectation it will come up to code, but we do not ourselves check on the condition of the building and whether it meets code. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Who
Tonight
does?
is about passing a permit that would allow for the land entitlements for a group home to be in place. And as far as the building itself, that falls under our building official to make sure that it meets all of the required codes for the use inside.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions for city staff? Okay, seeing none, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item? Is there anybody in attendance who wishes to speak in opposition of this agenda item? Thank you. If you could you write your name on, is there a list up there? Write your name and your address on there, please. Also share that information with us.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Dillon. I own adjacent property. I fall squarely within the pink circle, but I did not get notification of this application from the city, nor did I get notification of this proceeding. I found out about this project from a neighbor, and I've been in contact with Mr. Billingsley for a couple of months. He told me of this hearing date. The reason that I did not get notification is my identity and my address are protected because I am a judicial officer. And our legislature saw fit to recognize that there is a very real threat to judicial officers if their home address is made public. I understand very well the need for this type of facility in this community. Every day in my courtroom, I deal with people who are struggling with addiction, who have lost their homes, have lost their jobs, and if they're in my courtroom, they've lost their children. I have to make the very difficult decision of whether to maintain those children in foster care, and in many cases, whether to terminate the parents' rights to their children forever because they cannot maintain or get control over their addiction. I don't want people who appear in front of me whose parental rights I may have terminated or even whose children I have ordered into continued foster care to know where I live. There are not any protections that can afford me that privacy in my own yard. If there are residents in this building who have appeared in my courtroom, and that possibility is very real. There was a fence put up behind at the edge of this property on my side of the line. It does little to afford me any protection from the view of this building. And I have pictures of it if this body would like to look at those. If I'm sitting on the ground in my yard, yeah, they can't see me. But if they're walking out the door, they can see right into my yard. If they're on the second or third floor, they can see right into my yard, right into my dining room. It's for those reasons that I oppose this application. I'm a taxpayer, I own my property. I should be allowed to peacefully enjoy my property without being concerned about somebody who might have a grudge against me and retaliate against me, knowing where I live. So for those reasons, I oppose this application.
Thank you. Any questions? Anybody else wish to speak in opposition of this agenda item?
Chairman Offerdahl and members of this commission. I'm going to speak more generally of my opposition to this.
Oh, yes, could I get your name, sir?
Dan Strandberg.
Okay, thank you.
I worked for several years as a probation officer for the North Dakota Department of Corrections. I know that, or I don't know of any similar housing for sober living or treatment facilities that has not, at least on occasion, had drug issues inside of the house or inside of the residence. It would not affect me, but it will affect people in our neighborhood. I am also in opposition because this is kind of coming after the fact. I believe they've had at least 8 people living in that house since May 2nd. And I think that it's kind of a backhanded way to try to get this permit rather than addressing it going forward. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Strandberg? Okay. Anybody else wish to speak in opposition of this agenda item?
Commissioner, Chairman, my name is Jonathan Lane. I want to speak out in favor of this if I'm allowed to. I was hoping it really didn't come down to this. I was hoping we could get through this and cooperate here. We're not part of the problem. We're part of the solution. The problem is an epidemic. If you guys haven't noticed, it's all over the country. Minot's any different. This is a sister company to the treatment center that we already have here in town that's doing very successfully. We have some women who are coming up on pretty much from day one when we opened. Things are happening. At this sober living house is a privilege to be there. It's not a punishment. Nobody has to go there. If you don't want to be there, we don't want you there. It's pretty simple. It's by honor. There, you are tested. There are no drugs. There are no alcohol. When I bought this place, we moved in there. There was 8 people crowded in one apartment. We don't have that. We cleaned up marijuana roaches. We cleaned up beer bottles. We cleaned up beer caps. We fastened down the siding. We put a new roof on it. We redid the whole entire parking lot. We put up a 6-foot privacy fence. I don't know how much higher we can go. We're not trying to hide anything. These women here are working their butts off to stay sober, to be productive members of society, to get their licenses back, to get their kids back, to be a part of this community. For us to say this isn't okay, this isn't going to happen, where are they going to go? A lot of these people already gave up on them. They don't have anywhere else to go. They don't have anywhere else to turn. We didn't. We're here for them. We want to be a part of this, and we're going to be here in Minot to help as much as we can, as much as you guys will let us. As far as the, these are 2-bedroom apartments. There's 6 of them. 2 in one room, 2 in another room, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, all separate. We're not crowding people into one house. This is a 3-story apartment building that we saw right there. There was more people living in that when we bought it than are there now. This problem's not going anywhere. It's up to us to come together to make a solution. This is where we educate people. This is where we break the stigma of addiction. It's real. This disease is really happening. This is affecting people. People are losing their kids. People are giving things up. But we're giving those guys the opportunity to get it back. We're giving them a chance to be productive, to get these things going, to beat the stigma, be something again, to be what we always knew we could be. The greatest thing I've ever did, the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. I've had several very successful oil field companies. I've never feel what I feel when I come here and the men's facility that we have in Watford City, North Dakota. I'm not able to reproduce that by anything else. This is truly a gift from God, and I'm truly, truly honored and a privilege to do his work and be here with him. I brought our house manager with us. She is our house manager. She runs the place. She's in charge of what's going on with the women from day-to-day operations. She's there with them all the time. If she would like, I'd really love to have her come up and offer what this program's done for her. You guys are okay with that?
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lane?
Mr. Chairman, sir, I'm wondering, so the 4 emergency residential staff, is that one staff member on a cycle 24 hours a day for the building?
So the 4 emergency are for women who have been sexually abused or physically abused. That's what's going on there. So we have one staff member there that's 24/7 there all the time. Yes, sir. Yep. She has her own apartment. Everything's hers by herself. She doesn't share with anybody. It's hers by her own. She's responsible for that. Thank you.
Chairman Offerdahl and Mr. I'm sorry, what was it?
Mr. Lane, Jonathan Lane.
Okay. First, I understand that there's a great need for what you're doing, and I commend you for trying to bring it here. But it does seem in this case that we have potential for an elevated perception that maybe one of the neighbors is an enemy. So, like, specifically, what kind of protections would be in place for Ms. Dill and Mr. Strandberg?
So, like I said, it is truly an honor and a privilege to be there. And so we are not looking to cause problems with anybody or hold those types of things right there. We started this whole thing out in Watford City with, you need to be sober, you need to go to meetings, you gotta have a sponsor, and you gotta pay rent. We now have a 7-page contract of things that are going on here that go, and if you don't follow this contract, you don't follow those things, you're asked to leave. Right now, I think there's 20-some women on the waiting list to do this thing. If you don't want to be a part of this, we're not going to have you there. And so it only works one way.
Have you had problems at your Watford City location?
No,
with
nothing at all.
Any drugs, alcohol, any problems with the neighbors?
Nope, not at one thing, nothing. No, we have the Kinsey County Sheriff's on board with us. They come over. Some of the guys are in the program as well too. They're giving back. They're a part of this thing. They're in recovery. They share their stories, experience, strength, and hope. They're more than willing to be a part of this thing. That's what we don't have anything to hide. We don't take sex offenders, and we don't take any violent offenders. So we have nonviolent drug offenders is where we're at on this deal.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, now I am very familiar with this property, and it's sort of oddly situated against a sort of suburban neighborhood. And all along that south wall of that parking lot, is it any possibility that you could build a fence or some sort of dividing wall that would separate it off from those in the community who might have concerns?
So the only thing that's open is from the street forward right there. And then the side's blocked off, and it matches up to the other side of the house. And in behind that fence is the playground for the kids. So we put a playground in there, we put a gym equipment or playground equipment, I guess, in there. And then there's the parking lot off there, which is offset by the neighbor's fence as well, too. So our fence touches their fence, which comes up and then offsets against the house. So the only thing that's open is the parking lot and the front of the street.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions for Mr. Lane? Okay, we may call you back up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Yeah, there's just a request to pull the mic up and speak a little bit louder so that the rest of the group can hear. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay. Hello, my name is Lindsay Leal. I am currently the staff member at Endeavor Sober Living. I guess I just want to give you guys a little bit of background on what this program has done for me and my family. I have a sobriety date of 8/26/23, and because of Mr. Lane and what he has done, I have been able to, I can't even believe that I'm standing here in front of you guys, first of all. Second of all, I have a set of 11-year-old twins that I am now, on speaking terms with my mother to get them back into my life. I just had them for an entire week. While still being able to help other women in recovery do the same thing. I am only able, I feel like I'm only able to help them and meet them where they're at because I have been through it myself. It is an honor and a privilege to be a part of something so much bigger than me, and to be taken, completely out of self as often as possible to help the next person. As far as, what kind of goes on, like we have quiet time, like in the building by 10, lights out is 11. It's 11 and 12 on weekends. Weekly UAs, also randoms. I have been the house manager since March. I was the assistant house manager of the women's house in Watford City before it was an all-men's facility before that. And I have yet to come across, like Mr. Lane said, we don't take any violent offenders or sex offenders in the program to begin with. So as far as, any retaliation, that kind of thing, it is also a 12-step based recovery home, meaning you have to, there are certain guidelines that we require as far as working a spiritual program. There is such a need for this, not only in Minot, but in so many other places in North Dakota as well. It's really exciting to be a part of, and it's really exciting to, get to hopefully watch grow into something that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I have one question for you, Mr. Lane, if you could step back up, please. Just a follow-up from a previous comment earlier that said that they felt like this operation was already currently open and in service. Is that correct? Or,
Correct. So my understanding of this whole deal was we didn't need to do any of this. I thought this was an apartment complex and everything was business as usual. I had no idea that we had done anything. Everything was okay. I actually ran it by John before when he was here, and I didn't have it in writing or an okay, but my understanding was we weren't doing anything that was not above board. Like I said, there was more people in that place than there are now.
okay.
I had no idea that this was even an issue. In
So-
Watford City, we don't have this problem. We get the houses and they're on board and we're going. We have 3 houses there. I just bought another one. We got another one moving in today. We'll have 32 here in another 3 weeks that are staying with us now.
32 people in this residence?
In Watford City.
Oh, in Watford
That's what I'm
City,
saying. I'm sorry. I didn't know we needed to go through all this, or I would have followed the protocol as what we did before.
So was there any concerns, if the board were to approve this, is there any concerns with the permits and the inspections and the updating and the, all the list of conditions that the city staff has recommended?
So as far as the structural stuff goes, we haven't done any of that stuff, but we have remodeled this whole entire thing. We put in new floors, we painted the whole entire thing. There's trim, there's baseboards, the cabinets are already done, all new appliances, everything in. This place is immaculate. So I don't see any of those things that we aren't already covered with.
Okay. So the question I have then for city staff is most of this is the code review and all the permits for this conditional use permit to even be considered would have to be done, correct, or agreed upon?
Chairman Offerdahl, for the most part, most of these conditions are just like boilerplate conditions that we place on all group homes in the city that come in and apply. So it's just kind of repeated language for group homes in general. And it speaks to that it's an institutional use, and Mr. Lane will have to get together with our building official to ensure that all of the he's code compliant. But again, that falls under the purview of the building official. This is about land entitlements. And I did want to clarify, Commissioner Kibler, you to kind of address this. So the conditional use permit is for the 12 residents of the group home. The additional 4 beds provided are for emergency residential services. That is a permitted use in this district. No permit is required for those 4 residents. It falls under the same classification as, say, the women's shelter as emergency residential services. And as Mr. Lane had mentioned, these are women that are victims of sexual or domestic violence. And so that housing is not included in this permit. However, we are restricting the total number of occupants in the building as part of the conditional use permit. So it's 12 residents of the group home, 4 residents of emergency residential services.
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying that. So that is really going to be 2 people per bedroom.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Lane while he's up here?
Thank you.
Anyone else in the crowd like to speak on this agenda item? Yes, sir. If you can state your name and your address, please.
Doug Bonsinus. I live next to the project. First question I have is, I never knew anything about this until I got your letter. And when I received the letter, I say, oh, okay. I thought somebody was just upgrading the building. I didn't know anything about it at all. My biggest concern is I am right next to it. The cement that runs for his parking lot is adjoining to mine. So I'm pretty close to him. I need to know what kind of residents are gonna be in this home? And I think there has to be some guide on it, and it has to be followed strictly. And so do the numbers. Now, I've lived there a number of years, and all of a sudden I get this and it says a permit for a group home. Group home, what is a group home? Does anybody have an answer for that? You? When did you find out about the project? Shouldn't have it been okayed before they even started remodeling the house and everything else, the building? Why are we finding about it now? And now we're not only, right now it says you're at 6, they want to go from 7 to 12 more residents. So where's the number going to end, and who is going to be there? What is the project that we're going to get done? What kind of people are going to be there? Are they recovering from whatever? Are they coming out of jails with whatever? Who knows what they've had or what they were there for? What are we going to be housing? Do we have a right to know that? Or don't we? Have any of you asked them questions? Is it a legitimate question? Anybody got the answers to that?
Well, I think Mr. Lane, and we can have him come back up and rediscuss what he had previously said
I
on,
think it'd be a good idea.
you know, because he kind of gave us a little synopsis or a summary here, just a brief little bit ago about how they come and where they come from. And the CUP is only going to allow them 12 residents as.
But what's the background gonna be of them
Right.
if there's, I happen to contribute money to projects that help people that are in trouble. And one of my pet ones is I send money to help young girls that get out of way too quick. They're pregnant, they have no place to go, whatever. I don't have a problem with taking care of them because I'm a firm believer that way better to save them babies than to get rid of them. So I think the residents that are here that live around this project, I couldn't hear a word that was said back there. I have no idea, and I'm hoping what he's doing this for is for the purpose of people that really need the help. But if you've ever studied any of these projects, the success ratio is not as high as people would like it to be in most cases. And what are the type of people that are going to be in that house? We should be entitled to know that.
Great questions. Mr. Lane, I'll allow you some time to, if you can touch on some of them questions, that'd be greatly appreciated. We might just have to raise the mic up a little bit. It sounds like they're still having trouble hearing you back there, sir.
Chairman Offedall, I guess I would just specifically like to ask Mr. Lane if, once he comes up, I have a specific question for him, and I think it goes along with your question. So if you give him a minute to come up, I would like to ask him.
Well, another thing too that's on the mind of a lot of the people in that cul-de-sac is, what does a project like this do to the value of the homes that we have there? You know, we've spent our lifetimes buying and developing these homes. Are they going to be an effect on that? I have I think I'm going to be right when I say it's going to take, and we're going to have a change in value of homes, and it's not going to be up. So maybe you should consider telling our taxes in this city, since our values are, if two homes came up, one in our cul-de-sac and another home just like it in another part of town, I guarantee you that the one in the other part of town is going to get way more than we're going to have a devaluation. And it's not because he isn't doing a worthwhile thing, it's just because that's the way the people we are. We would rather stay away from it if we can, even though we'd like to see it be successful. So I'm on a two-way street here. I kind of want this thing to happen, but I also have a family living next to it. And if I have something moved in there that is going to jeopardize my family, I'm not going to be very damn happy about it.
You know, if I can jump in, I think Mr. Lane probably has responses to many of your questions and concerns, and so it might be wise to just kind of hit pause and maybe let him speak and answer. Might be a really
I
beneficial
don't have a
thing.
problem with that. Thank you. Thank you for your listening to me.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Is that better?
Even a little more. Can you actually raise the dais?
A little better? Okay. I think I touched on it already.
Can you hear?
Can you hear?
Okay, so I touched on it earlier. Who's coming there are non-violent and non-sex offender people. We're bringing women in who are pregnant parenting women. That's our primary focus right there. These women are, like I said, they don't have anywhere to go. Everybody's already gave up on them. There's no other options for them. We're their option. We're there for them. We're going to 100% support them and do everything that we can. As far as the comments about the housing, all I know is I put $400,000 of my own money into this apartment complex. We've also partnered with the state of North Dakota, who granted us money for the opioid use disorder settlements from Big Pharma. So we were part of that grant. So this came from the state of North Dakota. The state of North Dakota is backing this project, and we have full cooperation from them as well too. Like I said, the money that I put into this project, the money that I've got in here, and just by looking at it from when I bought it and the improvements that we made, that has probably made everybody's project or everybody's house go up in value by the way it was before and the way it is now. As far as the women that go there, they're substance use disorder. They've all been diagnosed with a substance use disorder. That's what we're dealing with here, addiction, alcoholism. Some of them do have some intermediate measures as far as probation. Some of them do not. Some of them are coming off the street. Some of them are homeless. Some of them have nowhere to go. Some of them have been sexually abused. Some of them have been domestic violence. These are real things. This is the real issue that we're dealing with here. This isn't pretty. This isn't cute. It's not funny. It's not a joke. Like, this is real life. This is what it looks like in Minot, North Dakota. If the need wasn't here, we wouldn't be here. There's plenty of other places to go. This is 2.5 hours from where I live. I just bought a house here last week because I'm here all the time. I want to be a part of the solution. I don't want to be a part of the problem. I'm here to bring this to Minot. We have people in our treatment center and people in our sober living houses that specifically come to Minot to purchase fentanyl because there's a plethora of it here. When this whole thing started, I was talking to Doug about this. There was a girl in your guys' ER that's 16 years old that got hit by a drunk driver. She's brain dead. The problem is here in Minot. We are not the problem, we're the solution. We don't want to cause problems with the neighbors. If someone's causing a problem with the neighbors and they're causing an issue for any of the other 15 women that are living in this house, they are going to be asked to leave immediately. We are not here to cause issues. We're here to save lives. We're here to give back. A lot of us are in recovery. All of us are in recovery. I'm in recovery. It's the greatest thing I've ever done in my whole entire life. It's also the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And we got comments like this that are coming up with the stigma, keeping us down, not supporting us, not trying to be there for us. That's part of the problem too. Instead of coming together and making it all a community issue, we're trying to sweep it under the rug and acting like it's not happening. That seems to be what I'm seeing these days.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Lane? Pull you back up.
I just want to clarify, what you're saying is not every one of the residents that go, maybe rephrase it, how do I say this? So the residents that go there, they're not coming from they're not coming from prison, probation. That's not what you're all about. The people that are there specifically to be sober.
Correct.
Not to check off a box for.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep,
So
nobody is court ordered there.
So so not everybody there is. I want to. What I'm trying to say is, they're there to be sober.
Correct.
Okay.
It is an honor and a privilege to be there.
Any further questions for Mr. Lane? We'll hold on. We'll allow you to come to the microphone. So the group, that's the process that we have up here. So it sounds like we'll call you back up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. I believe it's Mr. Strandberg. Is that correct? All right. Thank you, sir. Yeah, if you can just come up to the mic, that'd be great.
I believe Mr. Lane said that he has people there that are on an intermediate measure. Is that correct? Intermediate measure is a probation term, and the probationer signs an intermediate measure to do whatever the intermediate measure tells them to do to keep from getting their probation revoked. So if he has people on intermediate measures there, he has people on probation there, and probably parole.
Did you want to touch base on that, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, he's 100% correct. I did say we have people on probation there, and we have people who are not on probation there as well too. But it is not a term and condition of their probation to stay there. It is once again an honor and a privilege to be there. Your PO cannot make you go there. We are a private facility.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask, and just to confirm, those who are on probation and staying in your facility are not on probation for violent crimes?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yep.
What kind of crimes are they typically charged with?
I would say 90% possession of a controlled substance.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Any further questions for Mr. Lane? Okay, see none, we'll call you back up. I'll keep the public hearing open. Anybody else wishes to speak on this agenda item? Floor is open.
I have a question for staff.
Hi, I'm Brittany Shattuck. I live just kitty corner from where the new facility is going to be. My only thing is he keeps bringing up this 7-page contract of like how they're going to keep these people accountable for their actions while they're there. But again, they didn't have the permits or anything, and we're hearing about this all in hindsight. It's just like hard to believe like how they're going to like, is somebody going to be watching over this? Like, are we going to be protected? Like, is somebody going to be checking in on this group home? I guess I just worry about our safety and I say, I know it's a good thing, and I think what you're doing is a good thing. My problem with it is, like I said, like, I just don't see, like, how, if they didn't get the correct permits to get this going, and it's obviously not up to code right now, and there's people there, how is he going to keep them up to code while they're in there? That's more my worry.
And just to clarify, we're not sure if it's not up to code or not. I believe that's the process they'll go through with the inspector to see if there is code violations, and if there is, they're required to bring them up to code, if I'm correct, from city staff?
That is correct, Chairman Offerdall.
Okay, so
I
nobody's been
don't
even
assess
in there to
building
check
codes.
it yet?
They've been in there, I'm guessing, on an apartment living, but this is an institutional, so
Yeah,
the codes are a
that's
little
what I
bit
was
different,
wondering.
right?
Yeah, okay.
The
Well-
change of use would require an inspection.
Okay. Yeah, that's just, I was just wondering if it was going to be checked on, like, on a regular basis then?
If you'd, Chairman Offerdall, I could answer that primarily for conditional use permit, which is the land entitlement permit for which we're having a hearing tonight.
Okay.
That is complaint-based, so if there were any issues with the adjacent residents felt they were not in compliance with the conditions of their conditional use, that would be reported to Planning Division. We would then start an investigate to find if there was any evidence to support a violation of the conditional use, and as you saw in the conditions, it is condition 8D. The CUP can be revoked at any time by the Planning Commission following a show of cause hearing that has been met the public hearing notification. So this body does have the authority to revoke any conditional use permit
Okay.
if cause is shown,
Yeah.
and cause would be violation of the conditions of the conditional use permit.
Okay. That was just my major question. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this agenda item, opposition or on behalf? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And we can turn it over to the commissioners for a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sort of very sensitive to the needs of a community to feel safe. At the same time, we've seen a number of permits for housing and homeless shelters, et cetera, and neighbors come out because they're concerned. But for well-managed facilities, that concern hasn't really proven valid. And since there is a need here and a process in place, I would move to approve based on conditions of fact, staff conditions of fact, this permit.
Second.
So we got a motion to approve by Commissioner Kibler and a second by Commissioner Longton. And any discussion?
I have a lot of questions, and I'm going to call on a couple city staff members. So, Mr. Schmitz, I'm going to have some questions for you as well. But while he's working his way up here, Mr. Dietrichson or Mr. Faulkner, this is the second facility that this company has opened in Minot. Is that correct? Or this is currently the second?
Vice Chairman Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, yes, they have another facility. The other facility is the actual treatment facility, if I'm correct, and this is an extended after-treatment living facility. They have also recently approached us about a third office space facility in the community. So I can say that Endeavor Sober Living is heavily invested in the city of Minot now.
And in your time, because I remember approving that CUP as well, has the city received any complaints, or do we have any reason to believe that Endeavor would be a bad actor in this field or someone who's not able to live up to the standards and the CUP that we place upon them?
Vice Chairman Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, we have received no complaints for the existing Endeavor Sober Living facility adjacent to downtown.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So, Mr. Schmitz, again, like Mr. Kibler, this is not the first time as a planning commissioner that we have had CUPs like this and requests like this come before us. One of the biggest things to consider is discrimination, and just the idea that this type of housing does serve primarily a type of person, and in making a decision, we should not, for worry of opening the city up to a discrimination lawsuit, consider the type of person that's being served by this request. We should be considering the legality and how it fits into our land development ordinance and our zoning code. Am I correct in my understanding of that?
Vice Chairman Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, that would be a correct summation of the situation. There's extensive fair housing law, and that addresses the aspect of people in this situation and their housing, and that they cannot be discriminated against. And so henceforth, the criteria of our land development ordinance should treat this as any other application. It should have no bearing what type of individual is there in the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that clarity. So final question then goes back to Mr. Dietrichson. The company, Endeavor, is currently operating with 8 individuals living in the facility or the premise now. Is that correct?
Vice Chairman Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, that is correct.
Okay, and so this conditional use permit is not necessarily to say whether they can operate or not operate. This is looking at an expansion and adding more individuals to this particular property.
That is correct. In the current zoning district in which the subject property lies, they are entitled to house up to 6 residents plus staff. And again, I will state those 4 emergency residential services residents are a by right. So with their current entitlements, they could house up to 10 individuals, 4 being emergency residential services, 6 being members of the group home, plus staff on site. That's existing land entitlements.
Okay.
So this would be an expansion of that up to the 16 total residents as were stated in the conditions.
So when we boil it all down to its most base, simple elements of things, we're not talking about approving or not approving or being in support of or not being in support of Endeavor and the work that they do. We are looking tonight at the bare bones fact of, do we allow 8 individuals to be there or do we allow 12 individuals to be there? Is that correct?
Close. Sorry.
Okay, clarify that for me
It would
then.
be, do we allow 10 individuals, 6 group home residents, and 4 emergency residential services residents to be there? Or do you allow 16? 12 group home, that's the one that they need the permit for the 7 to 12, and the 4 additional emergency residential services, that is a by right use on the property. So it's a difference of 10 or 16.
Okay, so again, I'm just going to lay this out for my clarity and maybe to walk through everyone. If we deny this request for a CUP, then the Endeavor will have 10 people living at that site, 6 of whom are recovering, 4 of whom, 6 of whom are recovering, 4 is emergency housing or something to that effect?
Vice Chairman Baumann, in order to qualify for the emergency residential services, you have to be a victim of a crime, or I think it's fairly easy for any number of these women to fall into that category. If they're in any kind of danger, if they didn't have this residential service available to them, that's 4 beds in the facility earmarked for that. That's a by right use. They could have up to 6 group home members, again, by right. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you for the clarification, staff. I appreciate the ability to kind of help just solidify my understanding. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the Planning Commission to amend its motion and add 1 condition, which would protect Ms. Dillon's privacy. We do allow the city, you can go up to 8 feet with fencing without a permit. If you go above 8 feet, you need to go to the inspections department and have a fence engineered through their requirements there. At the very least, we should at least, along her property line and where there might be any visual impacts, provide higher fencing or shrubberies or like arborvitae bushes that could provide the extra protection that she is requesting. I would ask the Planning Commission to take that into consideration.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would accept that as a friendly amendment to my motion.
Chairman Offerdall, I would just note that in finding that as a condition that should be met, if the Planning Commission wanted to go down that route, it must be based on a criteria that is not related to the status of the individuals here to avoid discriminatory practice against the provider and the individuals here. So it should be based on something that would be applicable to any other similar situated housing.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Schmidt, could we require the fencing or the bushes to go around the entire property line, the backside of the property? That way, it's not we're not just picking out one property owner. It could go along the entire property line instead.
Chairman Offerdall, the Community Development Director Billingsley, the analysis is not based on the neighboring properties. It's based on whether we would apply the same to any other applicant. With a different status, right? And so there has to be a reason to justify the condition based on some other criteria, not the status of the applicant.
Mr. Schmitz, do you have a legal recommendation on behalf of the city of a way that we can protect? Because I think Ms. Dillon's case is a very, very, very unique one, and I appreciate Mr. Billingsley's respect, and I would love to find a solution, but I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, I suppose some brainstorming perhaps could come up with one. I don't have a good idea off the top of my head. I just want the Planning Commission to be aware that they need to treat this as they would any other applicant.
Can we then, colleagues, maybe table the issue and give our legal staff some time to come up with a solution that will stand the century code test and not put our city in legal peril? It won't change anything that's going on there right now. It will just give us a month to find the correct way to protect this particular property owner because of the work that she does.
I would just suggest, Chairman Offerdahl, Vice Chairman Bauman, that the motion that's on the table be dealt with, and then if there's a new motion made here along Vice Chairman Bauman's lines, just to try to keep the Robert's Rules of Order as clean as we can here.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could, do you think there is any legal remedy? You've countered a couple attempts at a reasonable remedy, but and the way you've done so have suggested that maybe there's not.
Commissioner Kibler, Chairman Offerdahl, I would defer to the planning staff. I'm not a planner, I'm just familiar with the laws here, so I would defer to the planning staff for recommendations on what to do. They're the professionals with land use, the land development ordinance, those items.
Mr. Diedrichsen?
I guess under the criteria on which we assess conditional use permits, the only one that I could see that might be applicable would be the proposed conditional use at the specified location will not be detrimental or endanger the health, safety, welfare, comfort, or convenience of the public. You could argue that visibility is in some way a safety concern, although in my professional opinion that might be a stretch.
Okay, any further discussion? Currently, we have a motion for approval based on staff's finding and facts, conditions, and recommendations. I think we need to move forward with this motion, and then if it does not pass, then we'll readdress. So for that, I'm going to call the roll.
Bauman,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Menum,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Fontanilla.
No.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on. Agenda item 5.4, Great Plains Edition. Public hearing request by Travis Zablotny, representing Leanne Zablotny Living Trust, owner for a request of a preliminary plat to create 2 lots for an unplatted half section of land zoned as C2 General Commercial District. This applicant also requests the property be rezoned M1, Light Industrial. The legal description for the property is north half, southeast quarter, section 23, township 155 north, range 82 west, Ward County, North Dakota. Subject property is unaddressed. With that, I'll turn it over to staff for findings and report.
All right, again, we find our subject property bound in black. This time we have a 600-foot notification buffer because it is located in the ETJ. It is on the north side of Highway 2 on the eastern edge of our extraterritorial boundary. Subject property's current zoning is C2 General Commercial. The surrounding area is zoned agricultural, R1, rural residential, mobile home, M1, and M2. The future land use for the subject property is gateway commercial, with adjacent future land use of light industrial, ag and open space, and rural This is the proposed plat for the Great Plains Addition portion of this application. You can see some site photos. Again, we have some wonderful photos of a agricultural field here in the great state of North Dakota. But this is adjacent to Highway 2 between here, the city of Minot and the city of Surrey. These are staff's finding of fact, and they can be found in staff's written report. So I have a two-part recommendation concerning this particular application, since two requests were made on the same application. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt staff finding of fact and recommend approval to the City Council for the preliminary plat for Great Plains Addition, subject to the following conditions. A traffic impact study required and must be approved by the city and North Dakota DOT. Access locations must be approved by North Dakota DOT, and a frontage road may be required. Sewer connection fees will apply. Stormwater management plan is required, and a development agreement would be required for any public, street, and utility improvements associated with the development. As for the second part, for the request for zone change, staff recommends that Planning Commission adopt finding of fact and recommend denial to the City Council for a zoning map amendment from C2 General Commercial District to M1 Light Industrial District based on the application's failure to satisfy the evaluative criteria as required by the City of Minot's Land Development Ordinance. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions for city staff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Diedrichson, what are those evaluative criteria? In short.
Well, they're in the staff report. They are outlined. So the evaluative criteria are outlined in section 9.1-7H1 through 4. Primarily, they focus on whether the proposed zone change is requested as a result of an error made in the zoning map, or if the zone change request is based in coming into compliance with our comprehensive plan and future land use map. As I stated earlier, the future land use for this particular property is gateway commercial. The request has been made to change the zoning to M1. M1 is not a complementary zone of the gateway commercial district. So that is why staff is primarily recommending denial of the application.
Thank you.
Oh, Commissioner or Vice Chair Bauman?
So then just to go a little bit further, basically we're spot zoning, where we're taking something very out of context and saying everything around this land is going to be used in one context except for this one particular parcel.
Vice Chair Bauman, Commissioner Offerdahl, spot zoning might be a stretch out here. This is, we'll call it a diversely zoned area of the city. There are several different zones kind of back in here. Being at the edge of the ETJ, all that I can say is that I know that this property was on the official zoning map for Ward County as C-2, which is their highway commercial district. When it was brought into the city, it is listed on our official zoning map as C2, which is general commercial. The zoning has never been changed on this property. That is evident by the fact that it remains unplatted, and platting would be a requirement of any zone change being applied to it. The comprehensive plan has designated this as a gateway corridor and placed gateway commercial as the future land use. So it's in one of those very diverse areas as far as the zoning goes. I'm not sure that it would be spot zoning per se. There is adjacent industrial zones and industrial uses in the area. It just does not comply with the goals stated in our comprehensive plan, and it does not comply with the future land use designation that's been applied to it on the adopted future land use map.
Thanks.
So, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Diedrichsen, you're willing to have the plat approved, but not the zoning change approved?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, there's no issues with the plat. It meets all of the design criterias for a major subdivision plat to divide an agricultural plat into 2 lots. There are no issues with the approval of this plat, and it meets all of the requirements of the LDO for subdivision.
So you would be requesting of us an approval of a plat and a denial of the zone change?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, these are both recommendations that you would make to City Council. City Council is the final decision on both plats and zone changes. It would just be, you'd be recommending that they approve one and not the other.
And just a little clarification too, this is just like 2 miles, east of the industrial park?
Chairman Offerdahl, that's correct. This is at the very edge of our extraterritorial. It would be right
Other
as
side of
far
town,
as our zoning authority goes towards Surrey.
Right. Minus Ashendor and stuff like that, it's all out there, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Any further questions for city staff? Okay, with that, I'll open the public hearing. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to speak on behalf of this agenda item?
Hello, Chairman and Commissioners. Travis Zablotny is my name, 1412 12th Street Southwest. Apologize in advance if I cough once in a while. I still can't get rid of a little dry cough I picked up a few weeks ago, but my family and I our farm in the area. We were involved in the implement business not too many years back. I purchased this property just prior, during the start of the oil boom, ultimately, looking, for the possibility to develop that as there were a lot of demand at that time for industrial type lots. Currently, and the other thing we had in mind at the time as we were in the implement dealership is we were thinking we may need a place to expand for ourselves. Between today and that time that we purchased that, we sold the business, and that's no longer our concern. However, those that own the business rent from us in our current facility and are looking to build their own new facility as they're way outgrowing that. With that being said, if I could quickly introduce Patrick Fisher with Plains Ag and Brian Everson with Northern Plains Equipment as a dealership here in Minot. They'll talk a little bit later, but they do have pictures of the design that they're looking at building on that acreage. So I want to give a little bit of history on this property. We purchased this property prior to 2011. Forgive me, I don't know the exact date. With the intention of developing that property into industrial lots. We worked in conjunction with Jerry Chavez from MADC at the time. They had developed Great Plains Energy Park 1, which is immediately to the east of this property. The Halliburton building, which is now the Ward County shop, is right adjacent to a part of this property. And we took an application, a plat that had an application for an annexation, a rezone, and annexation, rezone, and the plat application, obviously for subdivision, to the city planning commission at the time, and ultimately to the city council. And when we bought that property prior to 2011, based on all the information that we were able to find, that land was zoned as ag. It had ag zoning indicated in the city documentation. Our engineer that we worked with at the time, Moore Engineering, presented the application to the City Planning Commission at the time as a rezone from ag to M1 at that time. In November of 2013, the Planning Commission decided to approve the plat, the annexation and the rezone going from ag to M1 on the entire 260 acre parcel. Right now, we're talking about just 80 acres of that property on the highway frontage. And subsequently, on December 2nd, 2013, City Council also unanimously accepted that recommendation and voted to make that zone change and that plat and annexation. We did not ultimately end up moving forward on that because things changed quickly in the oil business and there was a lot of investment that would have needed to be made, and it at that time appeared that that wasn't going to be the best decision. So we never did go through with the second reading, nor did we file the plat. So today it sits as we purchased it, we farm it, it's ag land 100% presently. So the history of the zoning on this property is interesting. When Plains Ag approached us about the property in terms of buying a piece to build a new facility, which, by the way, the plat and the zoning, the purchase is contingent on that at the moment, came to us and we jumped in the city site and, to our surprise, found that this subject property showed a C2 zone on it. And the property to the north of this, it's on the same parcel, was M2, which is up adjacent to the railroad and directly across from the county shop. I've been asking since that discovery how that property went from presumably ag zoning, which is what we discovered when we purchased it, and now we submitted an application, to now all of a sudden being M2 and C2. And the answer that Dan has researched, the best of his ability, is that in 2011, when the city pulled the rest of that property into its extraterritorial jurisdiction, typically there would be an identifier on each township section range as to what the township or the zoning designation was with the county and what the city has now zoned it. That doesn't exist apparently. The records are not being able to be found. So I'm gonna, I guess, disagree a little bit with the planner's comments that this has been C2 since 1962 on the county map. I don't disagree that that exists. We have no idea if that was a future land use plan that was actually executed zoning. I've asked for records historically on how property has been zoned, and nobody seems to be able to find an answer to that. So the best, to my knowledge, we have no knowledge that it changed from when it changed hands, when it got into the city ETJ, that it actually was recorded as C2. However, mysteriously, it does show up in the system that way. To my understanding, when there's a zone change done on property, specifically by the city of Minot, there needs to be a hearing, there needs to be landowner notification, there needs to be a process where the landowner themselves are in agreement, or at least have the opportunity to express their disagreement if that might be the case, and we've never had that opportunity since we've owned it prior to 2011. So there's a couple of things that to me demonstrate that zoning has been an error. We don't really know what it's been zoned. My contention is that it's ag zoning today and has been. One other little piece of information, there's the mobile home lot in between our property and some other industrial property was rezoned in approximately 1994, correct, Dan? From ag to MH. So that is an indicator to me that my position on ours being ag is more accurate than Dan's position, or on, I'm sorry, Dave's position on it being C2 since 1962. We don't really have those documents. I've asked for that document. He does not have one. However, he states that that is the case. And then I guess when I asked for it, your comment to me back was, well, we don't need it. We can do whatever we want. So apparently in Minot, the king decides what the land is going to be. I don't know that doesn't fit for me very well. And then the next thing I guess I'd like to talk a little bit or speak to that I think is one of the biggest hangups in city staff's plan is recommendations or staff analysis is simply that the long-range plan says that it needs to be gateway commercial, which, trust me, believe me, I'm all for it. If we could get Costco in there like your plan states and shows for gateway commercial, bring them. You know, I'd love to see them. But here's reality. The reality is that it's 80 acres, and then you're in the city Surrey limits. On the Minot side of the 80 acres, I'm going to present you all a map here shortly. That entire property, those properties, mostly all the way for the next mile, are like 90% M1 zone presently. And the use of that property is used as M1. One of the things before I forget, I'll hand out that map if you would. Just the one. So Tiffany's just going to give you a map of what the present zoning looks like. Our subject property is to the lower right of that map. This is everything north of Highway 2. The blue line is the city limits. And as you can see, I think that Commissioner Bauman's comments about spot zoning, that's my opinion as well, is that we have almost no C2 zoning out in that area. It's almost 100% M1 or M2 for as far as you can, come back to 55th Street, at least at Minot. And it's clear that land use has been and will continue to be industrial. Now, I want to be clear about something. I totally support the notion of why it was identified as gateway commercial, and that is because we want our entrances of our city to look clean and neat and orderly and presentable. We don't want a scrap yard, which we kind of have already, a couple of them. We don't want those kind of things at our gateway. We'd like to control that and make that, a more appealing entrance, especially off the highway. I'm going to advocate that what we're proposing here is that. It's precisely that. It's gateway commercial. The reason for our request as M1 is simply to protect the $10 million investment that will be made there by Plains Ag in this facility in the event that the unforeseen happens and 5 or 10 years from now they need to sell their facility. If we don't have M1 zoning on it, the limits are extreme to what it can be used for that type of facility. With a conditional use permit, it will always remain as an implement dealership, but there's no guarantee there's buyers there for another implement dealership, especially at that price. At a minimum, it devalues the property. I think my proposal in that regard is we ought to have gateway industrial, right? So we should be able to have an opportunity to have a clean entrance, have specifications that mirror C2, that make a gateway property, but allow it to be industrial, because there are industrial uses that can accomplish that. And quite honestly, prior to the most recent change that you made as a body here, implement dealerships were only allowed in M1. And I believe that change was made because the John Deere dealership plans to build on some property that they own south of town that they discovered that there was no appetite to zone M1. Which makes sense because, again, that was gateway, right? And there's no other industrial out there. So we're convoluting a few things here, but at the end of the day, the request for M1 is to protect the subject property building for its value into the future. 2, it is, if you look at it, it's spot zoning. If we just have that 80 acres out there, that C2, it doesn't match the rest of the properties that are there. The other item I guess I would contend is hang on one second, it just ran out of my brain. Does that ever happen to anybody here? Yeah, we're I guess, and one other thing I'm going to go to, I presume that many of you on this body were a part of the long-range planning process. I'm familiar with that because back at the oil boom time, I was a planning commissioner like all of you and was a part of that process. So I fully understand that. And I'm guessing your experience was the same as mine, and that was planner from the outside or a consultant was hired to come in, and they brought us a bunch of colored up maps, and we went through 2 or 3 or 4 different planning meetings, invited the public for input. And at the end of the day, you know, I might have known a little bit about the east side of town, and somebody might have known a little bit about the south, but we really don't fully understand the depth of the plan that we're making and how property will actually function in that plan until we actually look at it. And so I'm guessing many of you, like me at the time, you know, you look at it, you nod your head, you say, yeah, that looks pretty reasonable. And so we get to where we are at the moment, and that is if all of our plans were perfect, including our ordinances and all our rules, why do we need a planning commission? You just have Doug say this is the rules, and you know, you either fit or you don't. The reason we have all of you is you got to make discretionary decisions, because we can't make perfect decisions every time we go into an ordinance or a long-range plan, as you know, we're witnessing. I'm sure you witness it every time you're here. And so that's the reason I'd like you to consider. I guess it was not brought to my attention at the time we filed the application that maybe we should have asked for a land use amendment. And if that's appropriate, maybe that's where we need to go with this. And that 80-acre parcel that's currently identified in the long-range plan as C2 Gateway Commercial be re-identified to match what Eastern Minot is. I would love to see tonight that you vote on this and that you allow M1 zoning on that property, but you could do it with the attached conditions to that property with that approval that mirror C2 requirements, meaning that we need the place to look good. And that's not unacceptable by the builders. They're intending to do that. They'll show you pictures. They have a very presentable, nice facility. And I guess in talking with Doug and Dan both, they both made the statement, and I don't think I'm out of line saying this, that they think that's a great place for an implement dealership. And, you know, we do too. It's just the highway access is there. You can't find that kind of acreage very easily in the city of Minot that has access to highway, city, sewer, water, all of those things, plus frontage, you know, and exposure. So it's a great place for that property. And whether you approve it, the plat, and they build it under C2 or they build it under M1, I don't see any different end result. I mean, we could be concerned about the future. If we are, let's put some conditions on it, the approval tonight, and allow that to happen. Maybe we need to make the text amendment to the long-range plan, because, you know, that's one that's easily overlooked and said, yeah, that looked like a good idea. I mean, we thought about it too when we bought it. Man, it would be great if we could get some retail commercial out here, some big stuff, but it's just not going to happen there in Minot if we're realistic about it. So we don't want to get in the way of good development in the meantime. One other thing that I wanted to, we witnessed tonight a couple different applications that had multitudes of zoning around it ultimately as well. And I know that was one of the concerns, is that there's an MH zone now would be sandwiched between Whether it's M1 or C2, I don't really see the difference. The property would be the same. That individual has chosen to live there. He's got a trailer house. He's happy where he's at and doesn't seem to mind his surroundings because, you know, he's well acquainted with Jeff Anderson, who owns a lot next to him, and Jeff, you know, runs a construction business, and he's got those type of activities going in and out of his building. And I don't know that he's here tonight, but I guess my contention too that was brought in here that I think is totally inaccurate is that it has a negative impact on his property value. It'll be quite the opposite. His property value is going to go up substantially, having the opportunity to sell that in either a commercial or industrial setting at the point that he decides that he no longer wants to live there. It'll be worth a lot more than it would have been without anything going on. And I think if he had issues with it, he'd be here tonight, and maybe he is. I don't know that, but so I'm going to advocate in section 9.17 that there is an error in the zoning map potentially. We just really don't know what the zoning history was. I advocate that it's ag. We're asking for it to go to MH, which is more consistent with what's out there. M1, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Not mobile home. I'm also going to advocate that, you know, I don't see that the M1 light district is going to diminish the value of the property in the vicinity. It's already there. I guess with that map, Dustin had mentioned earlier, but when you look at our subject property, you've got the mobile home next door, you've got the next lot is Excavating Inc., the next lot is undeveloped, you've got FedEx Freight out there with a warehouse, you've got Food Services with a truck repair shop, you have Penske that just built a truck repair shop, you have Roscoe Crane, you have HD Waterworks, you have another independent individual with a repair shop, you have Dawn to Dusk or whatever On the Run it's called now. You just approved a conditional use for propane to go in on one of the lots just south of the county. You've got the county shop, you have an undeveloped parcel that there's an interested buyer there that would be very similar to what already exists in that area. You've got some warehousing, you've got some oil companies, you've got another freight company, Porter Brothers, or now called Gerdau. Of course, I'm aging myself. I'm talking like my dad used to when he talked about landmarks, but anyway. So, and then you go to the south side of the highway and you've got a fiberglass tank manufacturer directly south. You have a trucking company that has a shop. You have an auto body repair shop. You have some warehouse condos. You have a cabinet shop. You have a school neatly sandwiched in there. Then you've got RDO. So my point is, you got a Pioneer seed dealer. My point is that where's Costco? Where's all this gateway commercial going to fit in that area? This is the application, and we'd really appreciate M1 zoning on it. And I think I've spoke entirely too long, so I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, or maybe I'm behind already, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Travis? Vice Chair Bowman, go ahead.
So the recommendation that staff has given us is approving the plat, denying the zone change. Is that something that you're open to as the applicant if we were to go in that path, or would you prefer full denial if any portion is going to be denied?
There's no point in not approving the plat. The plat itself is, you know, we paid the fee for it, and I guess my expectations is we have another step in the process here that we would pursue in talking about that long range plan. So I'd like the plat to be approved regardless.
Thanks.
The plat isn't official till it's filed anyway, so.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Zablotny, I think you make a somewhat compelling case here, and it suggests to me that probably we'll need to table some of the request here in order to get information because of the basic discrepancy between the provenance in zoning between what you're saying and what Mr. Diedrichson's office is saying. I would say, however, in defense of the purpose of the commission here, is that we have gone against future usage before. So it's not as if it comes down to us, from the hand of God, so to speak, we've got to abide by it. We do change it. So.
Any further questions for Mr. Zabotny? We may call you back up, sir.
Thank you very much. I think that maybe Brian or Patrick probably would like to show the project that they're desiring to do.
Could state your name, that would be great.
Patrick Fisher.
Brian Everson.
Brian is the store manager, operates the store in town for us. I oversee the operations of Northern Plains Equipment. We're part of a Case IH dealership network in North Dakota and a few other states. We've got 9 stores in western North Dakota, ranging from Minot to Stanley to Williston to Beach, Bowman, back over to Bismarck. We're invested in this community. We want to stay in this community. We've got a facility that's dated right now. As the ag equipment gets larger, our facility doesn't facilitate the operation needed as far as serviceability of the equipment. Our intention was originally to put an addition on that building, tear down part of it, and add a 120-foot by 250-foot shop with higher sidewalls and cranes that allow us to do that. However, because of the floodplain criteria, we'd be required to have the new addition 2 foot taller floor height than the current, which makes it not feasible. So we've been looking for property for several years now, and while the property is not perfect that Travis is proposing, we do have a purchase order on the property contingent on rezoning to M1. The investment is rather large once we start building this building. And I've been in the equipment business for 30 years. Brian's 31 years. We go through highs and lows, and there's change of ownership through the years. If I look at Travis's mom and father, how many years did you guys own the dealership? So they owned it for 31 years, and then we ended up buying it. Our intention is not to sell it, but we don't know what the future brings. And the planning committee here has been good to work with, and the conditional use permit would allow us to build what we need. But from a risk mitigation standpoint, if we ever get to sell it, the conditional use permit follows the occupancy of the building, not the property, which potentially limits us on the selling side of it. And a dealership build-out is, I say $10 million, but it's going to be probably on the top side of it before we're all said and done on this. So it's a $10+ million investment with a rather high risk potential on the downside for the event if we would have to sell it. And it's got our ownership group a little nervous at this point. But we want to stay in the community. We can't find property that's on 83 corridor or Highway 2 corridor that allows us to transport this large equipment without, inside the C2. So what Travis is asking is ultimately what we'd like. In addition to just getting the building going, this has been delayed several years, just trying to find the property. So with that, Brian, if you'd show them what we're thinking. We got some pictures of renderings from our architect that we've got hired. We got more engineering on staff doing the flood and our drainage mitigation. Probably, I don't know how.
You have it on a USB, Dan. You have it on a USB.
We've got it on USB if we want to throw it on the screens.
Yeah, Doug is the one with the computer hooked up. You have a USB.
So Doug's got it. So this gives you a rendering of the building. It's quite a bit of improvement over our current one. If you're familiar what our building looks like, we're on the Highway 2 bypass down in the bottom, the Case IH New Holland dealer. This would be, the main part of it is the shop, which is 120 by 250 by 34-foot sidewalls. Then an office space that's probably equivalent in square footage, two-level building. If you just go down, I think there's a couple pages in there. There's the rendering of the site plan. I'll keep going down a little bit more. Floor plan. Right there. There's further down is a 3D rendering. Right there you go. So it gives you a perspective of what we're looking for. And Doug agrees that it meets the C2 as well as the M1 requirements. The request for M1 is for mitigation for future, for anything risk at this point. So brought our staff here. So this staff has been in this community, living, working in this facility in the future, and hopefully for many years to come, I'm hoping. But we've got the store manager, parts manager, assistant store manager, and our service manager fighting for a new building. Ask me when every day. And this is going to be a 2-year buildup once we start. Are there any questions I can answer? Brian, do you have anything to add?
We just wanted to bring the pictures of the building, because I know we talk about the gateway and the edge of town and making everything look decent and whatnot, and that's kind of why we brought them with, because it is a fairly decent looking building. There's going to be a warehouse in that back corner, loading dock, but I just wanted you to be able to see what we were thinking. It's just not a pole barn. It's not a stick-built thing with one window in it. It's going to be a monster out there. So,
good-looking monster.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions?
All right, thank
Okay,
you.
seeing none, we'll call you up if we have any more.
Chairman, we printed a few things out that I didn't hand out, if I could do that quickly.
Absolutely.
So the first item is actually the Planning Commission minutes from November 15th of 2013 that show the change in zoning. It's on page 4, but just want to give everybody a copy of that. Show you that there's documentation on what was done historically on the property. Like I said, it did not get recorded, so. And then the other one is simply the vote following month that, again, affirmed that in the first reading.
And that's as far as it went. Is that-
Thank you.
And that's probably buried in there a little bit further, it may be.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, the public hearing still open. Is there anybody in opposition of this agenda item that wishes to speak right now or has any questions? Okay, is there anybody that wishes to add anything else to this agenda item and before I close the public hearing? Okay, seeing nobody coming up, I will close the public hearing and turn it over to commissioners for a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if we couldn't ask Mr. Diedrichson a few questions before a motion? Or
Typically, we go to a motion and
Go
then
to a
we have
motion
discussion
first?
otherwise, yeah. And then we address that motion.
I guess I would move to table this request to a next meeting until we can find out more information about the provenance of zoning here, because Mr. Zablotny makes a case that perhaps M1 zoning is germane
I
to this
do
region.
have the
and-
information.
Pardon?
I do have the information here and ready to present.
So I would, okay.
Okay.
So what I would recommend here is let's make a motion. Let's get a second and we'll go to discussion. And then we can vote on that motion after discussion. And then we either a yay or nay, and that might present another motion. If we
Okay,
if
Mr.
we find-
Alfredall, maybe help me with this motion. The motion to approve based on staff finding of facts, the change to C1 or C2 zoning.
M1.
To deny the motion to change to M1 according to staff findings of fact and request. That in keeping with,
The motion request for approval was for the final, for the preliminary plat. And
Yes.
the request for motion, recommendation of a motion of denial was the change of zoning from C2 to M1.
correct. And I guess I'm making a motion to approve the plat and in keeping with staff finding of fact to deny the move from to M1. Is that clear? That's my motion.
Okay, can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Commissioner Longden. Now we may open up the discussion.
Yeah,
Like-
Mr. Chair, if
Okay.
Mr. Diedrichson can present information about the provenance of the zoning for this
All
area
right.
would help.
First of all, I'd like to start by addressing the misquoting of what I had said to Mr. Zablotny. I did not tell him I don't need anything. He is arguing that the zoning is different from what the adopted official zoning map for the city of Minot is. And I stated that that requires proof, a first reading and second reading of a zoning ordinance amendment, map amendment, to prove that the zoning was ever changed. What I said I don't need is any proof that it wasn't changed, because the city council doesn't pass ordinances to say that the zoning is staying the same. They only pass zoning ordinance amendments on first and second reading if they're changing zoning. All right, next we can address some of the provenance of the zoning. Here is a scanned copy of the official zoning map for the township this property resides in. This property is located right here in this hash-marked area, which you can see is zoned C-2. This is an official Ward County zoning map that was adopted in 1962. I cannot provide this to the applicant if he requests it, because I do not hold this map. It is in the office of the Ward County Planning and Zoning Administrator. I have stated that to the applicant on several occasions, that it can be viewed in that location. I do not possess the original map. I only possess scanned copies that were provided to us. I would like to point out on this map that zoning ordinance amendments to this map are done in red ink. So the showing of black ink and hash marking for the C2 zoning distinction shows that it was the official zoning at the time of the adoption of this map, which was in 1962. So this would have been the official zoning map for this property until it was brought into the city of Minot's ETJ in 2011. There may be some staff error in assessment of the property as an application in 2013, which labeled this property as ag. It has never held the zoning distinction or zoning district of ag that we can find any records. We can find no records that the property was ever changed from C2 to agricultural or M1 or any other zoning district. Generally, if a property is being rezoned, it also needs to be platted. This is unplatted property. The zoning distinction was C2, County C2, from 1962 to 2011 when it was brought in, and it is currently C2 on the city of Minot's official zoning map, which is can be seen here on our Minot Geo Hub. It's important to note that there are multiple C2 properties along that corridor. There is some M1 up in this area. As for the future land use designation, there really isn't a whole lot of diversity. The city of Minot, when they adopted this future land use map, clearly we're looking at developing a commercial corridor in that area. So I don't know that there is a whole lot of argument as to whether the property was zoned C2 before it was brought into the city and continues to be zoned C2 now. There was an error on a staff report. As to speaking for the Planning Commission report from 2013, this staff report was created while assessing the request under a completely different comprehensive plan and a different land development ordinance. So the recommendations in this staff report aren't valid today. They were made under completely different evaluative criteria. Since then, the City Council has adopted a new land development ordinance and a new official zoning map. As for the plat being approved on first reading and the zoning ordinance amendment being approved on first reading, that is an incomplete application. It was never finalized. They did have a recommendation of approval in 2013 and likely could have brought their final plat and their second reading of the zoning ordinance map amendment at that time and received the zone change, but under our current evaluative criteria, our current official zoning map, and our current future land use map, it does not satisfy the evaluative criteria in the land development ordinance that staff provides recommendation based on to this body in our staff reports. If there's any other questions.
Quick question for you here. Go back to your future land use map. So are we going to approach, or in the future, if somebody changes from an M1, we're gonna make this all C2 gateway now because the future land use map is recommending it?
Chairman Offerdahl, essentially what the future land use map does is it provides different districts that have complementary zones. There are other districts that fall into the complementary zones for gateway commercial, other, office park districts, central business, there are business districts that can be applied here. It's not just C2, C1, C2, office park, things of that nature can be applied, are complementary zones of that future land use.
So all the red here that we're seeing here, that's all gateway C2.
It's all gateway commercial.
But it's all currently M1.
The only zone change request that they could make I could purchase one of those M1 properties tomorrow and request that it be changed to C2.
Correct.
Or I could maintain its current land entitlements of M1 and not request a change. It's also important to point out that looking at this future land use map and our evaluative criteria, the staff very much supports the implement dealership out there. It was also stated that up until recently, it wasn't allowed in C2. Implement dealerships have always been allowed by a conditional use permit in C2 since the adoption of the LDO. They're also allowed by right in M2, M1 office park. Make sure I got the right line here. In the office park, in industrial 1 and industrial 2, industrial park 1, industrial park 2. It's allowed in all of those areas. I think the primary misunderstanding is how the entitlements tied to a conditional use permit work. The owners are applying for a conditional use permit for a tractor implement dealership in a C2 property, and that entitlement follows that use in perpetuity. As long as the use doesn't change, they can continue to operate that business in that location. Never have we had an issue where conditionally permitted use in a district wanted to sell their business and any governing body of the city of Minot has seen that as a reason to revoke or remove any conditional use permit. It's a land entitlement granted under the current land development ordinance and generally follows the property and the use without any risk to the owner.
So based on current practices and historical practices, if an implement dealer built and wanted to sell to an implement dealer, there would be little to no reason to not keep the conditional use permit in C2 with the building, with the land, and there would be no red flags or even yellow flags with an implement dealer coming in and buying that space.
Vice Chairman Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, I cannot, in my understanding of the entitlement that would be granted here, understand any reason why that entitlement would ever be removed from an existing use just because of a transfer of ownership. Generally, the only reason that a conditional use permit is revoked is through violation of the conditions for which it was, under which it was issued. So it's important to understand that as the applicant stated, he's spoken to both Dan and I've spoken with our community development director. Staff fully supports this. There's a clear path to entitlements for this project that goes through a conditional use permit. The applicant could have secured land entitlements this evening with a single hearing in front of this body had they applied for a conditional use permit as was recommended by staff. And entitlements could have been in place now. The conditions that would be placed on a dealership such as this in this location would be minimal. It would meet the landscaping requirements. Staff would recommend that the applicant request that chain link fencing be allowed since of security concerns. And then any engineering conditions that are generally placed on our conditional use permits. I would leave that up to the engineer, city engineer and his staff to decide what those conditions are, but generally you would find some engineering conditions attached to it.
Unfortunately, the public hearing is shut down. Sorry, Mr. Travis. I guess I'll just add my 2 cents to this, and I feel like it's been mentioned, whoever said it or not. It does feel odd that C2 is out here in a majority of M1. And I also will reiterate a point that Mr. Commissioner Kibler made about not following the land use map in the future. You know, we did it as a city to ourselves back when we expanded the landfill and we didn't follow the future land use map. When we made that expansion, to me, it doesn't make sense that C2 is located further outside of our ETL on the other side of M1. So it just seems logical. We have a company that wants to stay in the community. So I guess that's kind of the direction I'm leading, but I will share that or leave it open for any other further discussion on that.
I think I want to just, again, go back to staff. It seems like your biggest concerns just has to do with the rationale for rezoning based on our current land development ordinance. So the rules of the city, the rules of our community, because we've run into those the last couple of months. What are the rules for an applicant, this applicant or any other applicant, to come forward and request a zone change?
Vice Chairman Baughman, Chairman Offerdahl, there are evaluative criteria by which this application. Oh, Dan, did you bring your laptop? I think mine died. Evaluative criteria by which the land development ordinance specifically outlines that each one of these types of applications need to be assessed. And one of them being, does it fit with the adopted comprehensive plan and future land use map that was adopted by the city council? And it needs to meet all of the evaluative criteria, but that one specifically, it fails to satisfy that. And I think it's also very important to again point out there's a clear path to land entitlements for the proposed project. It can be accomplished through a simple conditional use permit without the need of a rezone. It's hard for staff to recommend approval of a rezoning application when a much simpler path to entitlements that meets all of the evaluative criteria for a conditional use permit is satisfied. A conditional use permit being evaluated would have come with a recommendation of approval with minimal conditions applied.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Diedrichson, it would be reasonable to say that were they to proceed with a C2 designation and build this shop, that were they to sell it to someone who wanted to have an M1 zoning permit for that land, that they could come before this body, make that request, make an argument based on the M1s around it, and get a hearing on that?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, what they would be doing is operating under a conditional use permit, not a zone change. Staff is recommending that they stay with the C2 designation that exists because that's supported by its current zoning and the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. Designation of this area as a gateway corridor and just operate under a conditional use permit. This body is able to place conditions on a conditional use permit. If you wanted to place a condition that this conditional use permit is indeed transferable with the sale of the business and the property, you could absolutely place that condition on there that this conditional use permit does not need an amendment or a renewal should the property be sold and should the business be sold. If that was a concern of the applicant themselves, you just place that condition on the conditional use permit, that it's a transferable permit that can be sold along with the business. That would allow them to sell the property, the business, and the land entitlements in a single package.
And remain C2.
And it would remain C2.
One quick question here. What's the can you maybe touch on the base and the process of making a land use amendment or adjustment?
A future land use
Yes.
map amendment is the same as a zoning map amendment. Generally, staff does not recommend that we change both of them at the same time. That falls into those spot zoning type issues because now you're saying we're just going to ignore our plan and we're going to ignore our zoning map and we're going to change the entitlements on this property altogether despite our adopted comprehensive plan and its stated goals. I would also bring to this commission that if you were to go that route, I would also recommend that you would send a recommendation to City Council that we make a text amendment to our comprehensive plan. Because our comprehensive plan itself designates this as a gateway corridor and places gateway commercial as the primary future land use for our gateway corridor. So at this point, we're talking about making a text amendment to our comprehensive plan, a map amendment to our future land use map, a map amendment to our zoning ordinance map, and possibly looking at a text amendment within our LDO. I mean, we're just throwing it all out the window at that point. And I guess staff recommendation continues to revolve around all of this can be accomplished through a conditional use permit application. We're amending a lot of documents for one project that has a clear path to entitlements within our current structure of our LDO.
Vice Chair Bowman.
This is another question for Mr. Schmitz, our assistant attorney. Are we on a slippery slope if we start changing things outside of our LDO?
With respect, what would what's the question? What would be changed?
So if we were to all of a sudden start granting zoning ordinances that don't meet the evaluative criteria as outlined in our LDO, what does that do for us as a community governing body, et cetera?
Well, it makes the land development ordinance, or at least that part of the ordinance, is effectively meaningless, right? The ordinance should mean something. It provides guidance for the individuals in the community or for what to expect. It's the fundamental principles of planning and zoning is it should be, predictive and everyone should understand what rules they're playing under. So I'd recommend following the land development ordinance in this matter. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
I think Principal Planner Dietrichson can, explain the rationale behind land development ordinances and planning and zoning at a holistic level. But not all cities have it. Of course, it's a choice a community makes to operate in a particular fashion. And what that particular fashion is, in this case, we have a land development ordinance that speaks to these kind of items.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Does that
Follow-up
answer?
question on that.
Yes.
So is this an LDO issue or is this a future land use recommendation issue? Because right now we have the LDO and surrounding areas is all MH or M1s, and we're spot zoning it, in my mind, by putting C2 next to it because of what the future land use map is stating. So I don't know that that's what's confusing me here, is because I know in 30 years we're going to want all this gateway C2. I get that, but right now all of it's M1. So why is it that big of a deal?
I think I might be able to clarify that if I can. So right now, all of those plots that are being used as M1, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dietrichson, are actually zoned C2, but they are granted use.
Not according
Vice
to
Chairman Bauman, Chairman Offerdahl, all of them are currently zoned M1.
Okay.
The only complementary districts that they could request a zone change to would be complementary districts in the gateway commercial. It's also important to note that the property itself isn't spot zone C2, it is C2. So the subject property is just remaining C2. It's not really a problem with our LDO as much as it's a problem with our comprehensive plan identifies this area as a gateway corridor, and our gateway commercial zoning district is the future land use district is the complementary district for those corridors. So we're getting way into the weeds on planning lingo here, but all of these different documents work together. We've got our current zoning map, which tells you this is the land entitlements in place now. We've got our future land use map that was adopted by the city council with our LDO. This is in our comprehensive plan. This is what we vision for our community in the future. Our LDO provides the evaluative criteria by which we evaluate applications as they come in, and our comprehensive plan is our overall vision for our community. They all work together.
Correct.
Yeah,
But
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Dietrichson, just to confirm the C2 usage and the replat to C2, that would be a conditional use permit?
Chairman
Not seeing
Offerdahl,
that here.
Commissioner Kibler, the replat is just a redrawing of property lines and boundaries within it. It has nothing to do with entitlements. It's just simply to do with subdividing the property from one chunk of land into two chunks of land. The C2 zoning that exists on there provides certain land entitlements to the property, uses you're allowed to do, permitted uses, or uses you're not allowed to do, and uses you're permitted to do as long as you meet the conditions imposed by this commission. That's what conditional use permit means. It means you're allowed to do this on this particular property, but this commission gets to decide any conditions that they may want to place on them in order to do that. So
One of the conditions we could place on this is that it could be transferred, the usage could be transferred to new owners. Is that correct?
And offered all Commissioner Kibler. As you may have noticed on the previous conditional use permit we heard tonight, because of the group home and the sensitivity of such a use, staff recommended that that conditional use be non-transferable. So any change of ownership would require the new owner to come in and show staff and this commission that they intend to run a tight ship, just like Mr. Jonathan Lane came in and explained to you how he intends to run a tight ship. That's the kind of use that you're going to want to rehear. A tractor implement dealership, I feel as though that's the kind of retail use that ownership is, this permit could be allowed to be transferred from one owner to another with little risk of any type of nuisance factors associated with it. One, it's a tractor dealership to a tractor dealership has very little in the way of nuisance potential.
Yeah, thank you.
Chairman Offerdall, just a thought as another staff member on that. One thing to consider here is that if the dealership sold it and the new owner didn't want to use it as a dealership, perhaps an oil company wanted to buy a big warehouse, right? Something along those lines, then the conditional use permit would fail at that point because it's not the same use.
Correct.
Right?
Doesn't transfer over to any new ownership. It's got
Well,
to
it
be
could
similar
transfer
use.
if the new owner maintained it as a implement dealership, right? But if the new owner wanted to use it as an oil field warehouse or a construction company or some other purpose for the big building, right? That would be where the conditional use permit would then fail.
So, playing both sides of the fence here, an oil company does buy it and they want to come apply for a new CUP, and most likely we may recommend that it goes to M1 anyways, possibly, or we'll deny it, and that would take away from the sale or hinder the sale.
Yeah, Commissioner Offerdall, hypothetically speaking, who knows what a future planning commission would do as far as a conditional use permit on a new use for the building, the property, whatever that might be, right? It'd be all speculating.
Correct.
So
Fair enough.
presumably it could diminish the value of the property at that time.
I strictly bring that up just because it sounded like the M1 to C2 was kind of a big pivot point on which direction they were going to possibly go. And maybe I misread that or dove too deep into it.
Chairman Offerdall, if I understood the applicant correctly, what their ownership group was nervous about is if they ever wanted to sell the implement dealership. Correct. I mean, if you don't place the transferability of the permit within the conditions of the permit, it would not be transferable. In general, they're just not transferable. Unless this commission decides to make it transferable. At that point, you're easing their concerns by saying if you just decide you want to sell your tractor dealership, or if you start a new LLC and you want to transfer ownership from one LLC you own to another LLC you own, you can transfer these conditional use permit land entitlements with the ownership. And you would, what I'm trying to do as staff is make a recommendation of how you can mitigate their concerns of the transferability of the land entitlements of this. If I understood what they were worried is that we just want to sell our dealership. It sounds like this dealership was purchased as a dealership from another owner. If they want to repeat that in the future, say just sell the dealership to another ownership group, allowing them to transfer this conditional use permit as long as the use stays the same. You can sell your dealership along with its conditional use permit. May be mitigate some of their worry about the risk of their future financial position. It sounds like what they're worried about is in the future, who knows what planning commission might set here, would they be willing to grant the conditional use permit again, or if our land development ordinance were to be amended where tractor implement dealerships are no longer allowed conditional use in the C2 area. I mean, years and years from now, we might find ourselves with a completely different land development ordinance. Allowing them to transfer that conditional use permit may mitigate some of their concerns.
Chairman Offerdahl, just to dovetail off that and finish this, I pulled up the code for a conditional use permit in our land development ordinance, and I can read that to you. And it specifies under term and expiration that it's a vested property right. In our current code, a conditional use permit goes with the land and not the applicant or the operator, and becomes a vested property right and cannot be taken away unless the operator, for example, is out of compliance with the conditions of approval set forth in the permit. So you have to reserve the right as a condition of approval to remove it, so otherwise it becomes a vested property right. Principal Planner Dietrichson, would you agree with that submission?
I would agree with that assessment. I guess I that's a part of the code. I mean, there's a reason why we put the right of this body to revoke if they fall out of compliance in the conditional use permit itself, as you saw in the previous conditional use permit. It sounds like the way the LDO is written is automatically transferable. So.
Mr. Baumann.
I think for the sake of transparency, and also so it gets in the minutes, I'm just going to share, I'm going to vote in support of the motion, which is to approve the plat but deny the zoning change request. But I'm also going to say that for the September meeting, which I am planning to be at, I will propose that I'm hoping the applicant will come back with a conditional use permit request, and if they do, then one of the conditions will be that the conditional use stays with the property if it changes owners.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wonder, is it possible at this point to do a friendly amendment to my motion to allow transferability be part of the motion now?
Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, the application before this commission tonight is for a zone change, not for a conditional use permit.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Correct.
Thanks.
There would, Chairman Offerdahl, Commissioner Kibler, there would need to be an application for it to be properly before the board or the planning commission.
So any further discussion? So right now we have a motion to approve the plat and to deny the rezone from C2 to M1. What's that? Yes, and that's a reminder that this is merely, we're a recommendation board. The final say is at City Council. So we are just looking at it from afar and giving our recommendations.
And Mr. Chair, then a yes vote would be for the approval of the plat, the denial of the zone change.
That is correct.
Chairman Offerdahl, just to summarize, there's a motion on the table. It is for the staff recommendations with regard to both components here. It was seconded, so that's what everyone would be voting on,
Correct.
is essentially the staff recommendation with regard to both items.
Correct.
Chairman Offerdahl, I seconded this motion to get the conversation continuing, but I plan to vote no. But I'm curious, if we vote no on this, are we still able to present another motion to approve the plat, or would that not be something we could do? It would include approving the plat, but are we not able to do that if we vote no on this motion?
You know, that's a great question. Just because it is two recommendations boiled into one, are we able to split them?
I would recommend trying to think how that would work. Normally, when a item is voted on, you can't re-vote on the same item. Does it become a new item? Just thinking out loud here, if they're split.
Is there a motion to divide the question or something?
Yeah, I'm trying to think how that would be handled by Robert's rules. Yeah, perhaps the cleaner way would be to amend the motion on the table to only deal with the first question, and then following that, the second item can be dealt with a second item, as it will be there will be no motion applicable to that second item. So perhaps that would be the better path forward, would be to amend the motion.
How about we just vote on the motion and deny it I can't say for that, so, okay, I see what you're saying.
Can we get an official reading of the motion again? Because my understanding was that we were moving to approve the plat and deny the zone rechange.
That is my understanding of the motion.
But the question on the table is if we were to divide this or deny this, then he would possibly, there'd be a motion to approve the plat and then do something else with the zoning. And being they're all rolled into one recommendation, we're trying to figure out if we can split it. Was the question, am I?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Could I make a motion to Commissioner Kibler's motion to amend by simply voting on the plat portion of it?
I believe Mr. Kibler would have to amend his motion.
Yeah, don't we have to vote on a motion before we start a new motion?
That's what I would recommend, I guess.
So it depends on if it's done as a friendly motion or a friendly amendment or not. If Commissioner Kibler would like to do it as a friendly amendment to his motion and the second agrees, then we can proceed. At least that's the normal operation for City Council and Planning Commission.
I don't know.
I'll accept the friendly amendment.
Again, should
Friendliest way I
acquiesce.
can.
Okay, so let's just clear up your friendly
Splitting.
amendment. So we're gonna split it. You're gonna make a motion to approve the first plat and
Correct.
staff's finding and conditions.
And then the second should verbalize whether they acquiesce to the amendment or not.
I do.
Okay.
So now the motion before the Planning Commission is to approve the plat.
I'll second.
It's already been seconded because it's an amendment, so the motion's changed, so it's been seconded, so the only thing left is discussion and a vote.
Yeah, so we are going to, so we have a motion to approve the Planning Commission's adopted staff findings of fact and recommend approval for the preliminary plat for Great Plains. Call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Johnson. Yes. Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
Yes.
Menum,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Pontanilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now we are going to open up a motion for a zoning map amendment from C2 to M1 light industrial.
Mr. Chairman, are we opening up a discussion, or are we going to now vote on
We'll do a
the
motion.
denial of
Yep.
the change in zoning?
Yeah, we'll go through the motion in the second, and then it goes to any discussion.
I'm going to move in order to keep the integrity of the LDO, that we deny the zoning map request.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I guess, sorry.
Yep.
Chairman Offenall, Vice Chairman Bauman. I can certainly understand the concern about the LDO, but I guess looking at it kind of like Chairman Offenall brought up, looking at the map, seems that the subject property is kind of being spot zoned, if that's the correct term for it. And I don't think it'd be compromising the integrity of the LDO for us to use our own kind of discretion to kind of change that. So I think changing it to M1, I think that would still not hurt the integrity of the LDO. It wouldn't be a slippery slope. Obviously, this body has the ability to kind of make those decisions on a case-by-case basis. We're kind of empowered with that ability. So I think that denying this on the basis of the integrity of the LDO, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I think the applicants have presented a pretty compelling case as to why it should be changed to M1. So I would just encourage a no vote on denying the zoning change.
My sentiments are kind of the same as far as it's more of a future land use map issue than it is an LDO. So, any further discussion? I guess we can call the roll.
Bauman,
Yes.
Johnson,
No.
Kibler,
Yes.
Longton,
No.
Benham,
Yes.
Offerdahl,
No.
Montanila.
No.
Okay, motion fails.
So that opens up the floor to additional amendments, right, or motions?
The Chairman, after all, the Planning Commission is free to continue the motion on the issue.
Chairman Offedall, I'd make a motion to approve the zoning change from C2 General Commercial to M1 Light Industrial.
Chairman Afdal, may I intercede here?
Yes, sir.
I would just ask that now that we're not, the Planning Commission is not following the staff recommendation, Planning Commission should, in this motion, also apply the evaluative criteria and make their own findings of fact with regard to the motion here so that that's documented.
Thank you.
How would I go about that?
Yeah, so the evaluative criteria, you could just state what your reasons are for making your motion, how you see it fits. So there's 4 items. It's page 239, Doug, I believe. It's essentially apply your rationale to the criteria.
I can
once we
read
get
them
here.
off here as Dan looks them up. Review and approval
Or-
criteria. Number 1, the requested zone change is justified by a change in conditions that occurred since the previous zoning classification was established, an error in the official zoning map, or by need to resolve a discrepancy between the official zoning map and the comprehensive plan. Evaluative criteria 2. The city and other agencies will be able to provide necessary public services and facilities to serve planned and potential development allowed by the zoning classification. Staff did find that the request met that evaluative criteria. There's no, it's just essentially, I'll tell you the ones we did find satisfied. If they want services, they have to pay to expand them. So we found that they did meet that evaluative criteria. Approving of the zoning change will not substantially diminish the conditions or values in the property in the vicinity. Staff found that that one failed to meet that evaluative criteria because now we will be surrounding a residential zoning district completely with industrial zone and the land entitlements that go with industrial zones. The proposed zoning change is consistent with the purpose of the ordinance, with the comprehensive plan, and with other adopted policies of the city. As I stated earlier, didn't meet the previous evaluative criteria of not being an error in the zoning map, so it did not meet the ordinance criteria. It does not fall within the comprehensive plan stated goal of creating a gateway corridor, and it does not and the future land use map is part of our comprehensive plan. So I guess the evaluative criteria that staff found that it did not meet was 1 and 4.
Are we able to simply suggest that we want to realign this with the 80% adjacent M1 properties?
Commissioner Offerdall, you're free to apply any reasoning rationale you want to the criteria. This is the criteria. And so, for example, the requested zone change is justified by changing conditions that occurred since the previous zone classification was established. If you can rationalize that what you just stated applies there, you're free to do so. It's within your power to apply this how you see fit, right? But there should be an attempt made to. But that's up to you. I can't advise you what it would be, but that's the purpose of the ordinance, is to use these criteria to guide your decision making. And so if you believe that that's a reason that you can satisfy that condition, that's your prerogative to Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. And I feel like we do this frequently. We realign everything once things kind of come. You know, we get applications on both sides, you know, so I feel like this is similar to what we've done in the last couple months, even briefly, so.
Yeah, so back to Commissioner Afterall, if I may interrupt, back to, we have a motion, it hasn't been seconded. I would encourage Commissioner Longton to complete his motion with the criteria he's using, and then someone can consider seconding it.
So you just want me to kind of explain how it aligns with number 1 and 4?
Yeah, the other two, you can just incorporate the 2 and 3. You can incorporate Principal Planner Dietrichson's recommendation that he found those satisfied already. So you can just verbally recognize that 2 and 3 are satisfied pursuant to what the staff found with regard to those. Number 1, I find that it is satisfied for such and such reasons. Number 4, I find that it's satisfied for such and such reasons. And this is my motion to approve based on these reasons.
All right. Well, I'd say number 1, they've presented their plan for what they plan to use the property for. I think they presented a pretty comprehensive proposal as to how it will still uphold the spirit of the C2, but it really more needs the conditions of the M2 for them to, or I'm sorry, M1 for them to do what they want with the property. So that's kind of my rationale for that. Still fits within the spirit of C2, but for what they're planning to do with it, it needs more of the conditions of M1 as far as I understand them. For number 4, consistent with the purpose of this ordinance, I think, again, their plan for it is pretty consistent with what we have envisioned for this part of the city in the future. Obviously, it would be, Gateway Commercial is like, to me, the proposal of having the implement dealership that fulfills kind of the spirit of the Gateway Commercial intention as far as I understand it. So I think that it's consistent with the plan, policies, and the purpose of the ordinance, because it's still upholding many of the policies that the city has in mind for this property. So I'm sorry if that didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm trying to figure this out as I'm going along.
Well done. So we have a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second by Commissioner Pontanillo. Any discussion? Any further discussion?
Again, for transparency, I'm going to be voting no, and largely I'm coming back to the idea that if we are making changes to the land development ordinance for this one person, where do we draw the line? Especially when there are some really great options in the C2 to get the same result that will still give protections to the builder. So I'm going to be voting no. It's not that I don't like the project, because I do, and I think it's going to be great, and that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
And just to add, and I'm confused now because I thought, Doug, did you not say that this was not really against the LDO?
It does not. Staff's finding was that it did not meet the evaluative criteria, and the reasons that they did not meet the staff's in staff's opinion are outlined in the staff's written report.
Okay, any other discussion? Call the roll.
Bauman,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kibler,
No.
Longton,
Yes.
Menum,
No.
Offerdahl,
Yes.
Fontanilla.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on. Agenda item number, what's that?
I think that's it.
We did the first, yeah, we did the plat, the first one. Yep. On agenda item number 6, miscellaneous and discussion items, item number 6.1, accessory buildings.
That'll be me.
Okay.
So over the past building season, I have noticed that Our LDO is somewhat harsh in certain situations when it comes to accessory buildings that people are allowed to build. Some examples I have people who are in the ETJ, they have 2 acres of land, but they still are zoned R1, so they're capped at 2 accessory buildings. Our code stops them at 2, even though they have more land for it. And I have other examples too we can go into, but I just want to show you the code tonight, show you how it's being applied, and then in the future, I would like to suggest a text amendment that changes it. Tonight, I would like to show you how I'd like to change it, and then I'd like to give you until the next meeting to think over it more, because I know it's already 8:10, so we don't need to go into a huge amount of detail tonight. So with the 2021 LDO update, attached garages are now being counted as accessory structures. And there's a strict building limit placed on properties regardless of size. And there's also a bucketing of building potential that ties to the house footprint on one side and lot size over a certain threshold. You can see here in section 3, here we go. All right, so what is an accessory building? An accessory building is any structure which is subordinate in scale and use to principal structure, i.e. the home. In residential districts, the most common example is an accessory garage. When you couple that with B, an accessory building may be attached or detached from the principal structure. All subordinate detached structures are accessory buildings. These coupled together mean that any structure attached or detached that is not the house or in addition to said house becomes an accessory building. Prior LDOs have not followed that necessarily, and they have given allowances for garages and outbuildings, and so this creates a lot of friction now that we're starting to move in this direction, as most people aren't aware of this, or they have, like I said, a bunch of building area that they can no longer do anything with. We have a lot of lots that sit vacant because there's no point in people buying them, because if they buy them, they say they could take their lot from 0.2 acres to 0.4 acres, but they've already maxed out on buildings, so all they would be doing is buying a lot to then mow more. So what I'd like to do is kind of change this rule to be more lot size based, and to amend rules like in R1, R1S, R2, R3C districts, no more than 2 accessory buildings are allowed, and in RR, only 3 accessory buildings are allowed. Rules like this don't take into account that R1 lots can vary in size from 0.1 acres all the way up to 5+ acres. There is a huge variety, and there are a lot of R1 lots that are out in our ETJ, which, if we followed the comprehensive plan, should be probably zoned to RR instead of R1, but they're R1 now, and we can't go back. So my proposed plan is to, instead of having arbitrary number cutoffs or to make it the size of the footprint of the house, I'd like to allow setbacks and lot coverage to be the primary drivers of building area. The lot coverage definition I'm using is from the end of the LDO, the area of lot covered by building or buildings expressed as a percentage of the total lot area. I take this to mean that the roof area of the structure. So any roofed area is what I'd like to measure it as. And so right now in our R1 districts, we allow up to 40% lot coverage. And in our RR districts, we allow 10% lot coverage. Again, those are just arbitrary cutoffs that don't take into account the size of these lots. RR lots tend to be larger, but R1 lots can be just as large as R1 lots, or RR lots. What I did is I obtained house and garage square footage data from the assessors, so I scraped 11,000 addresses, and I turned them into 10th acre increments, and I manually calculated the top 1% average of maximum lot coverage to see what the natural progression of Minot's housing area is. So the graph I'm going to show you now is the natural progression. So these blue bars are the top 1% lot average. So those, what I mean by that is I've taken every property from 0.1 to 0.2 acres, and I have taken the top 1% of that bucket, we'll call it, and I've calculated its lot coverage. And you can see that there's a natural progression down because people don't build, you know, they don't build it proportionally to their lot. Houses are naturally a certain size. And so what I'm seeing here is a trend that then I could model by following with this teal line. These black lines that stick up and above are the absolute max for each category. And so what I'm proposing to do is to take a midpoint between these as that dovetails with current entitlements that people enjoy now, and then use this in the calculation of how much accessory buildings they can have. If a person comes to me and say they fall into the, let's pick an easy one, 0.6 to 0.7 acres, that would be a 20% lot coverage, and it would just be the roofing of all the structures on the property. That includes the house, but as you can see, not even the most overbuilt house in the 0.6 to 0.7 would fall under that. And so setbacks become your policing mechanism here, because these lots require 25 feet usually in the front, or 40 depending on the road, and then there are side and rear along with any easements. They naturally kind of constrict building. And so to conclude, house lot coverage follows a natural progression from 40% to 10%. The top 1% of properties represent the most built-out scenarios, and following this trend would be consistent with the current and previous entitlements. This would only apply to accessory buildings. This would not apply to, say, an apartment complex who wanted to build on a 2-acre parcel. They would still enjoy the 50% lot coverage they have today. I merely want to allow this to allow homeowners who go to buy larger acreages so they can build more storage, that they're allowed to build more reasonable amounts of storage instead of what they're allowed now, which in many cases are 1960s, 1980s era houses where the attached garage is not big enough to even fit a modern vehicle, let alone anything else. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. That was very impressive. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, item 6.2, I guess I asked to have this put on. I was just curious to see, I guess when I started the Planning Commission, I was addressed a Minot, City of Minot email address. I didn't know how many people actually have a City of Minot email address. Does everyone kind of, this is just open for discussion. There's no really voting on this, but.
I do, but certainly prefer to get email through Gmail.
So one of the questions that I get often, I get called and asked, and I don't know if it's just based because I've had my name and number out on that website for a number of years, is, you know, how do I get a hold of Commissioner Kibler? How do I get a hold of somebody else if I want a question? So I just asked Doug and Brian to put this on here for just a simple discussion. Right now, there's currently no contact information on the website. It's just a list of commissioners. Some people prefer to be private, and that's totally acceptable, I guess, in my mind. If other people, I think if they would want to put their email address on there or something, I feel like we should have that opportunity to request that and add it. But it was kind of an open to the board here on what you guys all think, or what, if you like it the way it is, or however it is. I mean, I can keep fielding calls. It doesn't matter, you know.
I'm not against having my telephone number and Gmail account put on.
I would prefer to have, not my work account, maybe my Gmail account, because everything is for open public on my work account, so.
Same here.
So Gmail I would prefer.
And I guess what I can see both sides of the fence. You know, it's a little privacy issue, but at the same time, in the past, I've been, you know, maybe contacted by an applicant that said, you know, I plan on putting this garage down this alleyway, and if you drive down the alleyway, you'll understand what I mean. And it's nice to drive down the alleyway on Sunday and take a look. and then have them ask questions and go, God, what was I looking at again? You know, so sometimes it's a tool that helps us totally understand if they were to reach out. Like I said, I totally get the privacy issue as well, so I don't think that it's a requirement on anybody, but I think if you're interested, we could talk to city staff and see if it's permissible to add a contact information on that web page if you chose to. Is that the best way to put it, Ryan? Yeah. Okay. So I just had them throw it on there for discussion. So, anything to add, Doug? No?
No, I guess if you'd like to have some contact information, I'd encourage you to reach out to Hannah and give her the contact information you'd like, and she will update the website with however you want folks to get a hold of you.
I'm in trouble, ain't I? I just added more to your task list.
I think it's a great idea. It's a key tool in playing both sides of the fence. Like you said, we're here as an elected and volunteer position, but also we want to have that advocacy with our community and also play our part as being this role too. So I think that plays a key in them being able to get to their source that they'd like to.
Well said. Thank you. So, okay, any other business? No? Congratulations on your award again, Tim.
Oh, thanks.
So
Appreciate
I
it.
didn't get to say it face to face. I said it'd be a telephone last time.
Thanks, appreciate it.
So, okay, other than that, if there's nothing else, let's go for adjournment. Thanks.
Yes, sounds good. See you. Have a good night.